Is that the right one?
No, because we're on green. Record only.
Oh dear. I've got to wait for it to turn off. Sorry, turn off. You don't need it.
I'm just waiting for the red. Here we go.
It's my fault.
Right.
And it stops blinking.
And it stops blinking. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the council meeting for Wednesday, the 16th of March. First of all, I'd like to call for apologies, and we have an apology from Mayor Neil Brown. Would someone like to move that we accept these apologies? Councillor Brahm, seconder, Councillor Rawlinson. All those in favour say aye. Against, no. Carried. Thank you. I'd like to call for extraordinary business. Councillor Lovett.
I have one. I have a petition and letters here from a local Voices for Freedom group. So that could be put on the agenda. That would be great.
Thank you. So we need we need to have a resolution that we accept this item into extraordinary business. Would someone like to move that?
Can I move to put that on, or does it need to be someone else?
So you can move that.
I'll move
yes,
that.
Councillor Lovett. Seconder, Councillor Falloon. All those in favour that we accept this extraordinary item? Aye. And we'll take that as item number 9, so that will be after the Mayor's report, as part of the Mayor's report, sorry. Thank you. Any declarations of interest? No. Before we confirm last meeting's minutes, the Mayor and I walked with Tamel from Turkey, who walked from Dunedin to the Eldor Mosque. We walked with him on Friday from Tynwald through to Ashburton, and he walked into Elmore Mosque yesterday, which was the 3rd anniversary of the terrorist attack. So I'd like to take a few minutes, or moments silence, just in remembrance of the 51 victims of that terrorist attack, please. Thank you. We will now move to confirmation of minutes from the council meeting on the 2nd of March. And we'll go through that. So anything to change on page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Can I have a mover that the minutes of the 2nd of March council meeting be taken as read and confirmed? Councillor Brahm, second. Councillor Falloon. All those in favour say aye. Against, no. Carried. Thank you.
Just check if there's any matters arising.
So next we have our ECAM presentation. So we have got Aurora grant coming in to the meeting, and we have Tracy Gray joining us through Teams. So should we move on to the next matter, which is the Stockwater race closure on Long Beach Road, and I'm just going to hand over to Hamish first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make council aware before this matter gets considered that we have heard from the objector to this closure just now, who has only just today become aware this matter was on council's agenda. She has expressed her disappointment that she was unaware of that, and we have apologised for that oversight, and would clearly prefer to have been present or to been able to present to council as you consider this matter. I note that She has previously addressed council on this matter. I note that you have included in your agenda the comments that she made last time this matter was considered. And we do, of course, this time have a detailed ecological report from a third party. However, I did undertake to Ms. Shrivens that I would make council aware of her late advice of this meeting and her concern at that before you considered the report or took it any further. So I'm doing that on her behalf, I guess, now.
Thanks, Hamish. Any comments or suggestions? Councillor Wilson.
I suggest we proceed. We've got an ecology report and we've got the letter from the participant that opposes it, so we can see both sides. So at this stage, I would like to see us proceed.
And that letter was written in 2020, that's correct,
That's right,
isn't it?
and that was the comment she made when she appeared before council when this matter was considered.
3 months ago.
Thank you. Councillor Falloon.
I would just like to support Councillor Wilson that we should proceed. Basically, this is a recommendation to council, so therefore it is a council decision to make. And as Councillor Wilson rightly puts out, we are basing it upon an independent report which has been done at the request of council.
Thank you. Hamish.
Madam Chair, I'm just seeing the body language of our presenters, and I just wonder whether I had misrepresented the timing of the letter or previous advice to you. So can I just, rather than leave you with the impression that it was the material she prepared last time she spoke, that might need correcting, just as I see the eyes being raised at me down the end of the table.
Thank you. Chrissy, do you want to update us on that?
Thank you, through the Chair. This letter that came in that I've provided to you all today was actually presented from Cheryl when the second application came, which is the one you're considering now. And so she did not send back her consent form, instead she submitted these concerns, which is why we have added it into the report today.
Thank
So
you.
this was actually at the time this particular application was submitted to council.
Okay, thank you. So that was
Thank you. I apologise for that
2020.
misunderstanding. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Bram.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, I feel a bit different. I know it's all been reported, but not notifying the person who was getting this around 3 years. I'm not really happy carrying on today, just because the person can't be here and was not notified in time.
Any more comments? We've heard two people, two councillors say that yes, they'd like to proceed. One that says to wait. Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move that we proceed with this matter forthwith.
Seconder.
Madam Deputy Mayor, I second Councillor Latham's motion.
I'll put the motion. Is there any debate? No debate? Okay, so I'll put the motion. Councillor Mackay.
Madam Chair, I just want it made clear, and I presume it's Councillor Latham's position as well, but it is definitely my position, that we have actually heard from the person against in a written submission on this closure, not any other closure. And that, to me, is that we have followed the process of inclusion of community members. That's the reason why I second.
Thank you.
The dots have been covered.
Thank you. I'll put that motion that we proceed with the recommendation or the report. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Again.
Okay, we'll carry that. Right, so we will proceed with this. So welcome Neil and Chrissy. Everyone would have read the report, including the the study and the letter from, or the closure survey form that we've received. Anything further you'd like to add? No? Questions from councillors? Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. My question is, when you say new Willoughby water race, is that going to, the blue line is going to be a new one, or is it already there, or why is it called a new Canterbury Willoughby water race?
Through the chair, it's an existing race that's there. It is referred to as the new Willoughby race in the ecological report. So I was trying to make sure that it was clear exactly which race they were referring to at the time.
Councillor Mackay.
Madam Chair, I just want to make sure that I'm absolutely clear on something. So my question is, am I correct that with the closure of this particular water race, which on our maps is coloured red and blue, will mean that there will be no discharge to groundwater if this is closed? Am I correct? I ask that because it looks to me as if it goes from one water race into another water race.
You're correct, yes. It's simply closing a junction off where it comes off. It's the same water race, it just closes the junction and takes that section out.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
Just to summarise my understanding of it, and that's what I understood, that it was being diverted to another water race. When I read the discussion from the report, which came from the ecological report, wherever it's come from, I get the feeling that the only thing of significance in there is a very common snail. Would that be correct in that water race? There's a few bullies, but they're not of the rare type, and it's a very common snail in there that we could relocate to another water race if need be. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. That's why we had a full ecological assessment done of it.
And this particular water race that we're considering closing is below half full most of the time and often dries up.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Falloon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the bottom of page 18, the consultants recommend, or make some recommendations. Have these been costed? I mean, what does it cost to move a few cockabullies and a half a dozen snails type of thing, and put buns in and that sort of thing?
We will be consulting with Arawhenua and asking them to see if they've offered previously to come and undertake this type of work for us. So we will be going back to them if the race closure proceeds. At this time, I cannot tell you what it would cost.
There will be some cost.
Yes.
You just need to put your light on, Councillor Kim. If you need.
Just to follow on from John's question, have we moved things before, water critters before? Like, what's the cost been associated with moving water, you know?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that because I haven't.
So we've got no
I haven't been
ballpark.
involved in this.
Okay.
And this
Thank
sort of thing
you.
before. I know they have offered to undertake the work on council's behalf.
Will that come back to council before that work's accepted or otherwise, or what's the way forward on that?
That would typically come out of our operating budget, so it's not deemed to be a huge dollar amount in terms of the budget, so we would proceed with it under our current budget.
Hamish, did you want to comment?
I was just going to say, Councillor, if you had concerns that the cost was unknown and might be unmanageable, you could consider the recommended or the recommendation from officers and move something slightly different if you wanted the costing to be assessed. We're not recommending that. We don't think it'll be major and we think we can accommodate it, but if you had concerns, you could move some sort of an amendment to accommodate that.
Councillor Falloon.
Yeah, following on from my earlier question, when you look at the photos, this water race looks like a mess, quite frankly. Who's going to be responsible for cleaning it up? Is that the landowners or is that council or who is responsible?
Through the chair, it's a local race. It's the responsibility of the property owners to maintain it. We will be recommending that it's left it swaled to allow for some stormwater runoff.
I've got a question. Is it usual that we do these ecology reports, and in the future can our biodiversity officer do a report similar to this?
Through the chair, this is the first time in 18 years that I've been working at council that I'm aware we've actually had to do a full ecological report, simply because of the sensitivity and the fact that we have one person who'd raised their concerns.
Yep.
It is quite an expensive exercise, and we are considering making use of our new biodiversity officer in the future to carry out this type of work.
Great, thank you. Councillor Rawlinson, question?
Thank you. After we debated this 4 years ago, I'm really pleased to have read the report, because I was one who supported keeping it open at the time. But my question is, and I did ask this question back in 2018, with what we call the blue line, the new race, if the Stuyvesants really, really wanted some stock water, could they pay to have it piped along Boundary Road back to their place from where it comes down through, I think it's Geddes' and hits Boundary Road? And I did ask the question back then, but it wasn't able to be answered. But now that we've had this report done, is that a possibility if they were prepared to pay to have some stock water come to their farm or farmlet?
Sorry, I don't know what the levels are will be the problem, because naturally you can't push water uphill.
Thank you. No, I think it's an excellent report.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. The last two bullet points, I don't fully agree. I've never heard of filling in a water race in an upstream direction. You're going to try and push the water in front, and then pump it out on to the ground. Usually you fill it stop it at the top, and you follow the stream as it drops all the way down and rescue fish or cockabullies. And also the bottom point, the contractor mitigating the residential flow, does that mean off the road? So that's a pretty open statement, I think, because looking at that water race, it doesn't really take a lot of surface water off the roads.
Councillor Wilson, it's residual flow, not residential. So, contractor to consider the means of mitigating the residual flow of groundwater along the decommissioned course of Willoughby Water Race.
Well, what would you consider the residential flow of groundwater?
Residual, not residential.
Through the chair, I would assume that's stormwater that they're referring to, overland flow. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions, Councillor Lovett?
I was just noting here that this property's been non-consenting. They haven't been paying rates on the water race, and all the others have. I'm just wondering, how did that come about? I thought everybody's paying for water races.
Through the chair, we are continually finding properties who have stock water races who are not paying rates. This is another one that has fallen through the cracks, so
Never got picked up.
we are working on that at the moment to try and get it sorted.
I mean, I would like to move the motion that we do close it,
I think
because
we've got a couple of other questions coming up. Sorry, Councillor Lovett. Councillor Letham.
Oh, well, I probably beat the gun a wee bit there, Madam Chair, because I was going to say if there are no further questions, I'm happy to move the recommendation that we approve the recommendation.
Yeah, I'll just go to Hamish quickly.
Just one point to note, that the officer's recommendation on page 6 is that the closure is approved. The ecological report contains 6 recommendations in relation to how we might do that. It might pay for the mover of the motion when that time comes to include the officer's recommendations from the ecological, from the officer's recommendations plus those in the ecological report, because I think that it is the officer's view that those recommendations in the ecological report should be adopted as well, but the recommendation that you're being asked to consider doesn't specifically refer to that. So I apologise for not kind of seeing that earlier, but in reality, the mover might like to contemplate the ecological report at the time of moving the actual recommendation that's in front of you. I hope it didn't confuse things.
No, that makes sense. Councillor Latham, are you happy?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
So when we move, a move that the council approves the closure, that it also includes the recommendations from the report.
Yeah. I went and had a look at that race this morning, and I followed it upstream and downstream, and it's got a little bit of water in it, very, very little. And in a wet season like this, I would have thought it was flowing quite substantially. There is water in it, but it's very badly overgrown. It's hard to see the water, so I think it's the logical thing to do. So I'm happy to move that.
Thank you. I'll get you to turn your light off.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor, and Councillor Mackay.
Madam Deputy Mayor, can I please second the recommendation, including the six items?
Yes, you can. We are now in debate mode. Councillor Cameron, have you got?
I'd like to move an amendment that we accept the motion but add a cost advisement there if it comes above X amount of what would be reasonable, you know. Like $50,000 to move some cockabillies, I think we need to know about that. No?
Through Madam Chair, I think we understand the amendment, but would I suggest that you name the number, because otherwise you're asking someone else to deem what is reasonable, and then it either is or isn't in your mind. So it would be much clearer if you, in your amendment, were quite specific.
Well, I'd say $5,000.
Okay.
I don't know, would anybody, too high?
No, that's the amendment.
So, okay, so Councillor Cameron's moved an amendment, which is that we approve the race closure with the recommendations from the report up to an amount of $5,000. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I've just, I've got no clue, but that's what I plucked out of the air.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? We'll go to Neil McCann first.
We can report back in our activity briefing on the costs and the process that we followed after this.
Okay, so we don't need to make an amendment to the motion. Okay.
I'd be very surprised if it is as high as the amount you mentioned, but we're happy to report at the activity briefing on exactly what it cost and what it involved.
Okay, I'll go to Hamish and then...
Madam Chair, I think what I was trying to advise Council on is in relation to the intent of Councillor Cameron, which was that we wouldn't do all those things if it cost too much. Yeah. And so, yes, we need to report afterwards for information, but if we report afterwards that it was $6,300, then that won't have met the intent of the amendment. So, yes to the reporting, but I think what Councillor Cameron is intending is that when we estimate the cost, if we see that it's going to be more than her $5,000, we don't have a resolution to close the race. It's contingent on the cost in her mind as to whether the closure should proceed. That's what I was anticipating or understanding her intent. Yeah.
So I've just been advised if the mover and the seconder agree to Councillor Cameron, then we don't need to have an amendment. So Councillor Latham, Councillor Mackay, just give me a nod if that, no, okay. Right, Councillor Wilson, are you going to second the amendment?
No, I'm not. I've got another question. Well, I want to comment on the motion.
I'll need a seconder first for the amendment. Is there a seconder for the amendment? No. Okay, so we go back to the original. Councillor Wilson.
Yes, we look at the bullet points at the finish of the ecology report. Bullet point 3 says, as the water race is dewatered, the receding habitat shall be electrically fished downstream to push any fish out the bottom. Number 5 says fill it in from the bottom. So to me, they sort of contradict one another. If it's going to be empty, electrically fished, why not fill it in from the top like normal people do? And I still maintain, number 6, as Mr. McCann said, residual flow of groundwater, to me that's flood water. So how on earth is a contractor going to keep surface water off a road along the decommissioned course of the water race? I mean, what would they expect the contractor to do with it?
Neil, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I think the wording may be a bit confusing, but the intention is to just ensure that there is no flooding, and the contractor will work with mitigating that fact and avoiding any flooding of the road or any localised flooding. I can assume that's what the intention is, and we'd be working with them to ensure that that's what happens.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm quite happy to leave it to our stock water officers to do the common sense thing when they come to fill it in, taking into account the ecological report.
Okay, thank you. So we have a mover and a seconder. Any debate on the matter? Councillor Mackay.
Madam Chair, I'm particularly pleased in the after listening to the process that has been through. I think it's been very thorough with the closure of this race. It's taken far too many years. Also very interested to point out to councillors that in that, that fifth point that Councillor Wilson referred to, it actually refers to any residual dirty groundwater onto adjacent pastures. Now, I've argued this many times at the council table that long grass is the best filter, the best way to get rid of any contaminants for water. It's commonly called a swale, of which are built at quite expensive costs in urban areas today to get rid of runoff, and I'm very pleased to see that in the report. I'm also very pleased that this water will not have a boulder hole at the bottom that will inject this dirty water referred to in this report, which I'm so pleased about, directly into groundwater. It's called injecting rubbish, or SHIT, into groundwater, and I'm pleased we're not doing that. So I think this report is very thorough, the process has been very thorough, and I urge councillors to vote for it.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. In principle, I will be against this motion because the affected party had not a chance to be here as such.
Thank you. Any more speakers for or against the motion? Right, a reply, Councillor Letham.
All I can say is I believe, Madam Chair, that the process has been followed. The objecting party knew that this was going to be put to the council, and she replied. And Councillor Mackay's comments are very valid. It's a good report, it's thorough, and I just urge everybody to vote in favour of it.
Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against, no. Carried. Thank you. And you would like your vote recorded. Thank you. Thank you, Neil and Chrissy. We now have a presentation and welcome Aurora Grant from ECAN up to the table. Thank you. And we also have Tracy Gray on Teams who will be listening in. And you've got a presentation for us, Aurora. Oh, and there's Tracy there. Thank you. Welcome, Aurora. So we'll just let you go through the slides and questions at the end of the presentation. Yes.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. I'm Aurora Grant. I'm the Consents Planning Manager at Environment Canterbury, and thank you for having me along today. It's nice to get out of the home office and come for a trip out here. So I'm going to talk to you today about our response to something I'm sure many of you in the room would have heard about, with the consenting of on-site wastewater applications out in northeast Ashburton area. And this presentation may look familiar to some of you who got along to one of our community meetings that we had several weeks back. So our current situation that we've got some existing subdivisions which have been through the process with Ashburton District, and now they are in the position, applicants, some of which are what I'll term mum and dad applicants, where they have brought a section themselves and are working through the consent application on their own, and others who are developers with a number of sections. They are in the position of applying for resource consent through Environment Canterbury to gain permission to put on-site wastewater systems on their new lots. What we've got is a situation where we have a very high density of both existing wastewater treatment systems in place on small lot sizes, and we also have drinking water bores in really close proximity. So I'll bring up a picture soon that sort of outlines the density. And that obviously gives us some concern around the cumulative effects, especially when we start looking at what is the existing water quality in that area. So for a bit of context, a wastewater system, if it's servicing around a household of 4 people, can actually contribute nitrogen levels that are similar to a small to medium-sized dairy platform, depending on what the system that they use is. So if you get a high number of these in a close proximity to each other, you can quickly run into some issues around consenting them safely. So add all of that together, and we've got an area which has very high nitrates in some instances anyway, because of the existing environment that we're working with. So that's all of the other land uses going on in the area that is impacting this particular area. And then we've put intensification of urbanisation on top of that. So the auditing of these applications, we've approached them as a collective, because pretty quickly became apparent that one on their own, if we're looking at it individually, isn't, you know, we can generally work through that, but when we're looking at a bigger collective with lots of lots going in, where there's going to be a number of new systems, that rapidly that could become an issue for the down gradient drinking water user, where that groundwater may not be safe for them to drink anymore. So if we look at the changing land use, and apologies, the maps are not all that clear, but we have seen a shift from, as I'm sure many of you are aware, in your area here, that there's been an intensification of development of housing going in place, and swapping out the sheep or the beef or cropping platforms there. So I think, apologies, there should have been references for the timelines on those maps, but I believe the one on the left, that was late 90s, early 2000s, and then on the right, modern day. So this map here details the area that we're talking about, and the blue dots show us the on-site wastewater active consents. So these are all of the systems, the individual systems that are already consented in this area. So we have consented, obviously, based on the map that I just showed you, we have consented systems in the past there. There's also systems that were installed prior to any rules, so are existing. And those older ones, obviously when they come up for replacement, will be caught by those rules, but we don't have a clear picture on exactly what's going on with those older systems. We've since had the subdivision occur through ADC, and then we've had a number of plan changes in terms of our national policy statement and MPS for fresh water, which we've also had to take account of. And all of that, coupled with the higher groundwater nitrates, is putting us in a particularly difficult position for consenting these applications. Just moving forward, this is the number of drinking water bore supplies in the area. So you can see that it does quickly become quite a lot going on in that area. The purple blobs are community water protection zones, and those zones are protection zones that the plan affords special consideration that we have to give when we're processing, and they are in relation to a higher number of users off a particular bore point. So some of the current applications, which are indicated on this picture in the yellow, they, as you can see, do sit within that drinking water protection zone as well. Now, back in 2000, and I appreciate that it was a very long time ago now, we did some very detailed groundwater nitrate mapping, and just an apology, I'm not a scientist, so I have stolen those slides from science, and they've given me a bit of a run over. But if you have any very detailed questions about this, I can come back to you on it. But this was the picture that we found back in 2000 with what was going on in the groundwater concentrations in the area. And what occurred from summer 2000 to now is science at Environment Canterbury pinpointed various bores, these ones, to continue that monitoring to give us an ongoing picture, but not to the same extent of that large-scale monitoring that was done back in 2000. What the science shows is that there doesn't appear to have been much change in what we saw on that more colourful map earlier. And you can see there that the graphs trending are going along relatively static, and in some cases trending up, which is not ideal with pushing more contaminants into an area. So we know that when we've got smaller lot sizes going on, there is going to be increased effects on groundwater when we've got on-site wastewater applications going in. So here's a list, and I'll let you read through it. I understand this has been circulated to you, but it's just a good outline of what does increase those effects. And as I mentioned, the big concerns that we do have is the health risk. Granting wastewater consents that is then going to increase the risk to other bore users is not a position that I'm sure any of us would be comfortable with doing. We've also got, and I mentioned it before, the new NES for freshwater management, and that requires us to have a higher regard of what used to be, where the line used to be. So now we need to put the health of the water body first when we're consenting anything. So the order of priority for that is health of the water body first, then drinking water and health impacts. We've also got tangata whenua values to consider, and much in the same vein as the NES requires us to do. Generally, and not speaking specifically to this site, but is improving things is mana whenua's desire there. And again, just when we've got these higher numbers going in, and when you look at it collectively, the cumulative effects makes it quite tricky in terms of planning framework to work our way through. So currently we've got 8 applications in lodged with us, but we do know that there are a number of others that haven't yet been lodged because they've been waiting to see what happens with their neighbours or with their developers working through the process. 2 of them are for subdivisions, 6 of them for those for individuals that I mentioned. Now, the point there about one notification decision pending is that's now out of date this week. Earlier this week, we have notified publicly one of the developers' subdivision lots, and that was particularly around unable to find a way forward with the system that they were proposing, and those adverse effects being more than minor on the receiving environment. We've got a further 7 that are waiting for a way forward, and we're working really closely with the consultants and the system designers to see if there's a system that they can come up with that is going to look after those nitrates. And a number of them are on more general sort of further information requests that were lodged earlier on in the process. And like I said, there's about 30 homes we think, or would-be homes that are affected by this in this area. So we do have some options available to applicants now, and the permitted activity framework would, if they choose to go down that road, would mean that they don't even need to seek resource consent through Environment Canterbury. The permitted activity framework in the ECAM plan does provide options for the installation of wastewater holding tanks, which don't discharge but require to be emptied regularly. So it's not an ideal situation for a homeowner who doesn't want to have the ongoing cost of sucking out their tank and having that emptied. There's a couple of different options with those holding tanks, one being black water and grey water, where the whole lot is emptied or captured and emptied, and the second option being where they split off the black water and the grey water, and the grey water is discharged and the black water is taken away. We don't have the same concern with just grey water discharge. It's able to be treated to a level that we don't have the same concerns. It's really the black water where we get the high nitrates and the coli concern. Obviously, the ongoing cost of that emptying is prohibitive for some developers and some landowners. Advice we've given for the applicants who have lodged applications with us is that there is obviously the option for them to continue with seeking consent, but we have been really open in the fact that it is likely that this consenting pathway, particularly for ones that are in those groundwater, the community drinking water zones, is quite uncertain for them. We are struggling with being able to move forward with anything but a public notification, and there's obviously no guarantee that they will receive a resource consent at the end of the process. That's also a lengthy process. It takes 75 days if it's limited notified, and 150 for public notification, and that too is quite an expensive process. So the thing about the notification is independent decision maker, even if they were looking at one of those individual lots, we would, they also need to consider the cumulative effects, so they are looking at the whole picture. And we have been exploring other options, but we have only touched on them because they are quite novel and possibly not what many house owners would consider a viable option for them in their family situation. So that brings me to the end of the presentation.
Thank you for that. Tracy, have you got anything you'd like to add, or you're just listening in?
I don't think I have anything to add at this stage, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to questions. We've got a few lights on, so go to Councillor Brown first.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just a question. You talk about subdivisions, and also you mentioned individual properties. So what is a subdivision? Is it just 4 hectares going in for 1 hectare, or is it 60 houses?
Tracy, you'll be able to probably cover off a bit more of what we're saying, but when I referenced both individual sections and the subdivisions, individual sections are more what we're seeing where they might have brought a section, so mum and dad have brought a section that was subdivided off, maybe a bigger chunk of land, and is sort of more separate rather than a whole lot of lots going through at once. I'll hand over to Tracy, who, sorry, apologies, I should have pointed out, I brought her along as she's more aware of the technical details and the details of the individual consents, so she might be able to help us out with what we're seeing there.
When we've referenced subdivisions, in these instances, they're quite small subdivisions. They're for example, the one where there has been a notification decision, it's cutting creating 4,000 square metre lots, and I think the other ones of a similar scale. So they are cutting one of the existing sites of about 1 hectare into the minimum lot size.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I've got a couple of questions. To me, the 2,000 is irrelevant, absolutely irrelevant. The next map you had, summer 2000, showing nitrate levels as well. Is that domestic wastewater the problem or the meat works the problem? If it was the year 2000, that was before any mitigation was done by the meat packing firm. Have you got any relevant nitrate tests that shows the mitigating things that the meat packing works has done to help E. coli and meat and nitrate?
Cool. So a couple of things there. I'm not going to talk in detail about the meatworks because we do have a current consent application on the books at the moment, and that's got to go through natural justice process there. But in terms of the relevant data, we do consider that is relevant data. We have ongoing bore monitoring, and by all accounts, the auditing that my team do in terms of looking at the receiving environment, we use the best available data to lead our decision making. Tracy, did you have anything you wanted to add there in terms of the current science? Just bearing in mind neither myself or Tracy are scientists, but I can give you more information on that if you require at a later date.
No, I don't think there's anything to add.
A supplementary. The next map you had, you quoted about 6 different well levels of nitrates. If you look at your map, they're all below the meat packers. And you went away and they were below the international standard. I think you're trying to jack this up. And Also, being on the zone committee, we were told that modern Oasis septic tank surface type disposal does not put E. coli or nitrates into groundwater. You know, the type that we used to dig a soak hole and put the surplus septic tank in. Now it's all got to be on the surface. Are these sewage disposal things in this area, are they old-fashioned or are they the new type?
Couple of questions there. I'll go to Tracy for the Austin Blue Water and comment on the individual systems shortly. But your point about the meatworks, there is a range of influences into the groundwater, and yes, that is one of them. No, we're not trying to jack this up. I would really enjoy being able to grant these consents easily, but at the end of the day, we have to do our due diligence and audit these applications to ensure that no next door neighbour is going to get sick from drinking water that's contaminated with E. coli or high nitrates.
Go to Tracy. There.
All of the applications before us, as I understand it, are all for advanced aerated systems, either discharged by way of drip irrigation or a sand trench. So they are considered secondary and at the top end of the systems that are available or widely used in Canterbury.
As I understand it, the issue with those systems is, well, they are extremely effective at removing E. coli if they are maintained appropriately. And for resource consent auditing, we make the assumption that they will be maintained appropriately, and we put the consent conditions on that require that. But they are not able to remove the nitrates, nitrogens that we're concerned about in this case, and that's come from the supplier. So that is part of the reason why this has been such an ongoing process, because we've been working with the suppliers of these systems to see what if they can treat to that level that we need.
You've got one more question?
One more. With your nitrate testing map, you had them all below the meat packers, why did you not do some out where the new applicants are to show that the nitrate levels were below the 11.3? With your map, you've done no, on our map, you've got no tests done in this new area. They're all in that concentrated area below meat packers.
Don't know the answer to that, and I don't know what the testing regime is in detail. I can get that information from science for you, but I would like to point out that applicants do also have the ability to test the bores themselves and provide us the data for that through the auditing process, and that is something that we have put to them. But it is an additional cost.
Thank you. Councillor Falloon.
Thank you. On the last comment on your current situation as part of your presentation, you've got auditing of applications has been slow due to these factors, causing frustration and delay for consent applicants, I presume,
yep,
is the end of that question. The question I have is, are these actually getting processed and consents given or not currently, or are we just in a holding pattern?
Some of them, at the request of the applicants, are in a holding pattern. So that's where the applicants have requested or used their own hold tools, such as Section 91D, to place those applications on hold to see what happens with some of the ones that are more down the line in terms of being notified and then a decision made. Others have requested time to go away and explore the permitted activity options, and we've given them that time. and others we are progressing through because they've indicated to us that they would like to continue. So it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of each one's individual, and we're working with the applicants.
And presumably those who are about ready to move into their houses, those consents are getting treated urgently?
Absolutely, yeah.
I see the two factors are nitrates and E. coli. You've got wells there which are giving you the amount of nitrates in the water in that area. How are you measuring the E. coli levels in the waters in that area?
Tracy, do you know the answer to that question? I'm not entirely sure how they do it.
I believe that, well, I am aware that E. coli is being measured and monitored, but I couldn't tell you the technical details on that.
But surely, with a lot of drinking wells in the area, it would not be that difficult to get some measures of E. coli levels?
I'll respond again that the applicant does have the opportunity, and in many cases is required to, put forward that information as part of their application. I think that in this case, because of the community nature and the crossover between subdivision and consenting through two different councils, we're being as helpful as we possibly can in terms of providing them the information to go alongside their application.
Have you got one more question, Councillor Falloon?
Final comment.
Yeah.
To me, it seems to be a bloody stuff-up, quite frankly, in that we've got one consenting authority, being ADC, who have given consents for houses to be built, and then ECAN have come along at the last moment and said, oh, sorry, you can't move in because you need a wastewater consent. Whose fault is that? ADC's or ECAN's, or is it a combination of both?
I'll go to Hamish
Well,
first, or we'll go to Jane.
Looking seriously at Jane,
Yeah.
to be fair.
We'll go to Jane and then we'll come back to you, Aurora.
Sorry. Thank you, Hamish. Just to answer an earlier question, I know ECAN do monitor private wells for E. coli, and also a number of property owners also have their own wells tested, and indeed are encouraged to do so. When there have been high readings in the past, as there were I think a year or two ago, I can't quite remember when, we have a responsibility under the Health Act to advise everybody. So working with ECAN, we, as quickly as possible, did a physical letterbox drop right through that area, warning everybody of elevated E. coli levels, which can happen, I'm told, particularly after heavy rain, and telling people that they needed to be not drinking that water. In terms of this being a stuff-up, to use your words, I think it's more a case of cumulative effects getting to a point where ECAN scientists have realised that we can't carry on the way we are. The subdivision consents that we've approved, we have been putting consent notices on them so that people are well aware of the fact that they still need a consent from ECAN before they can proceed. So basically that's like saying, proceed at your own risk. If you want to take the punt and carry on with your subdivision consent ahead of a discharge consent from ECAN, then so be it, but be warned that's still a process you have to go through. ECAN science team have been working on this issue for quite some time, from certainly when we first raised it 2 or 3 years ago. Their science team did start looking hard at certain areas of Ashburton, and indeed, as ECAN will tell you, this isn't a problem that's unique to Ashburton. It applies across a lot of Canterbury, particularly the plains, and that science has led them to this point. So I think perhaps the way it was communicated could have been better, and Aurora has freely conceded that previously, but I don't think there's any getting away from the fact that this was a point that we were going to inevitably arrive at some point in time.
I'm just going to go to Hamish too now.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Through you, Madam Chair, just to that issue of communication, which we know was frustrating, which has been acknowledged here. This presentation, and correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, it looks very similar, may even be the same presentation, was made at a public meeting a few Saturdays ago. So that those interested people who are either in the consenting process or thinking about subdividing or building, included suppliers from at least one of the holding tank manufacturers, plus a range of our specialist staff and a good contingent of ECAN scientists, specialists, planning people. That public meeting a few Saturday mornings ago covered all these issues with the people affected. So while we might think perhaps the communication somewhere was slow to get underway as everyone was wrestling with this cumulative issue, that's not true now, and I would maintain that the communication has improved markedly, and people might not still be liking the answers, but they can't claim to be in the dark. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other comments?
Yeah, just to add to that, we have obviously recognised the communication at the front end of this wasn't ideal, and now have a way forward with any future subdivisions between ADC and Environment Canterbury and our consenting teams to ensure that this is communicated proactively. So while we've got those clauses in your consents, we're also doing, prompting the due diligence of those applicants up front.
Thank you. We've got a couple of last questions. Councillor Mackay.
Oh, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Aurora, I'm surprised that 2000 is a long time ago.
Sorry.
I really am. I'm sorry. That's a comment. A number of questions I've got, and I'll try and simplify them. In the 2000-2002 episode out there, were people getting sick? And that's why ECAN was alerted by the Ashburton District Council.
I don't have the answer to that, sorry.
May I suggest you do a wee bit of homework, if I can be so bold?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. No, I'm pretty new to ECAN. So
the wells that you now have much detailed data on, were they agreed to through a public process? For example, where did ECAN put those maps up on a well, up on a notice on a screen and say, hey community, what do you think of the siting of these wells? And the community went yes. Did any of that go on at the time?
Tracy, do you know the history of the consenting of those bores?
No, I don't mean that. Sorry, I don't.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll enlighten you. If I may.
Yep. Well, absolutely.
Yeah, I chaired that meeting. Okay.
Yeah.
And it was in the, if I name a rugby club, it was in the Celtic Rugby Club rooms, and the people present said, yeah, that sounds a good spot. The meatworks were also there as well. Yeah. Okay. So back in 2000 to 2002, there were people getting sick. These wells were put in, as you indicated. Now I've got the results. Do you think that that was a warning to the Ashburton District Council to be careful? But the Ashburton District Council has gone only as far as putting warning notices on when doing subdivisions. Do you think the Ashburton District Council should have heeded advice and maybe put a scheme in?
No, I don't.
You don't?
No, the planning framework has moved considerably over the last 22 years, and we've got quite a few lessons learnt in that time, and we are at the point now where we're understanding what nitrates do in our drinking water a lot more than what we did back then, and in addition to that, the real key issue here is the nitrate nitrogens, not the E. coli, which I'm going to make an assumption, so correct me if I'm wrong, that the people getting sick were more from the E. coli side of things.
Yep.
Yeah. So it has all moved considerably. So apologies, I don't have the detailed history on the site, and I do appreciate that there is some cumulative effect issues there from meatworks and other contributors, farming across the region, and the down gradient movement of groundwater, for example, is another issue that we're very alive to. But no, I don't accept that was a warning that wasn't heeded.
So in your opinion, the Ashburton District Council did the correct thing by, in later years, putting warning notices when they issued titles for people to double check.
That would be best practice to be putting that in those, so that is a common occurrence. So when two councils work together, you've got two different options there. One, if something is quite big and complex, often councils will work together and go to a joint hearing. In that case, that wasn't required because of the difference in planning rules here. So the subdivisions, when Ashburton District Council staff were looking at your rules, they didn't see any big issues that required the working together. So followed best practice and put those consents in place with that warning, and then ECAN picks it up. So it's a classic which comes first, the chicken or the egg. In this case, ECAN is the second cab off the rank. So we are picking up this issue now. Yeah, I don't accept that it was a warning that was heeded, wasn't heeded.
You just got one more question, Councillor Mackay.
No, I'm going to hold it for another venue, another time, Madam Chair, because I actually think something should have been done at the time. I think there should have been schemes put in, but I fully agree with the officer that the right process has been followed as per the planning rules, and we have been attaching and warning people of the science.
Thank you. Councillor Lovett.
I just had a couple of questions from people that live out in the area. They're asking why hasn't the cemetery groundwater testing been done there? Because I don't think it is. What's that attributing to it? And also they were worried, is this going to spark off a review on some of the old septic tank systems in the area? You know, will they need to upgrade going forward? Because, you know, there's a lot of older housing out there and those tanks are getting old. Will that spark a review for them to do something there?
So I'll come to your second question first. In terms of a consent review, there obviously needs to be a consent for us to review, and a lot of those older properties, the existing systems don't have consent because they were installed prior to us having any rules. I understand that there is a lifespan on systems, and that as a septic system fails, they need to be replaced, in which time that's when they go through the consenting process. So that's one way we pick up and look the quality of those older systems. The second way is obviously through the compliance road. Now, I understand that the current permitted activity tanks that are out there, systems that are out there, don't get routine or monitoring from Environment Canterbury in terms of permitted activity, because our focus is on the consented activities that go on across the region. And also, I imagine any district council monitoring as well that goes on would pick up and alert us to issues. But occasionally we'll be alerted to, and this is more generally speaking, not just in Ashburton, would be alerted to, say, a leaking septic system by seeing a spike in a bore that's being monitored. Which I appreciate isn't ideal because it's very reactive, but that is one way that those older systems do get addressed. Coming back to your point about the cemetery, I'm not aware of any monitoring that goes on, but just because I'm not aware of it doesn't mean that it isn't done or isn't planned to be. Again, that's something I'd need to take back to science, unless Tracy has the answer to that. She may have had a similar question.
That's a question.
I think it would be advisable to get the answer from science.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Aurora and Tracy. Doesn't look like there's any further questions, but thank you both for taking the time to come and present to us at Council today. We really appreciate it. Safe travels home, Aurora.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, we'll go now to item number 7, which is on page 30, and that's the presentation from Kath Lowe and Bruce Moffat from Christchurch NZ. So we'll welcome them up to the front table. Thanks, Aurora. Welcome, Kath and Bruce. And councillors, you would have all read the half-year update. And Kath, you will take us through it, is that correct?
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me here this afternoon, Deputy Mayor, elected members and senior executives. This is my first opportunity to meet you, so by way of an introduction, I'm Kath Lowe, the Head of Tourism for Christchurch, New Zealand. The report has been shared with you for the last few weeks, so rather than possibly going through it page by page, perhaps I'll ask a question and then provide an update on context as to where we're at from a tourism perspective. Today is a very exciting day, as you can well imagine.
Yes.
Are there any questions?
Thank you. Everyone would have read the report. I've probably got a couple of questions first, if that's okay. The survey that you did I found really interesting, especially some of the answers. Was that done throughout the Mid-Canterbury tour? I mean, there was a lot of answers came from Methven, obviously, but had that was that done through all Mid-Canterbury tourism businesses?
That's correct, right across the whole of the Mid-Canterbury district.
Yeah, and the other question I had is, I mean, I see that the new hot pools in Methven are busy, and they seem to, Methven seems to be quite busy in the weekends now, and I presume a lot of that traffic is coming from people visiting the hot pools, but was that something that you picked up as well? Was that something you can report on?
I haven't had too much reporting in the way of numbers from Puki Thermal Pools and Spa, other than during the December period. They had their highest number of people at the park, which was 411 people in one day, which is quite exciting for the wider Mid-Canterbury area, because it's delivering a great economical benefit there. I do know that they are closing on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. They announced yesterday they're closing on Wednesdays just because of the COVID situation that they're trying to deal with, and so I think that will be very short term. And I think today's announcement will also sort of build a long term plan as well for them and also the rest of the town.
Yeah, thank you. Question from Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My question on our page is 39. I'm not sure yours is one with the coloured line graphs on visitor spending. It's quite a wee way through.
It's this one here.
Anyway, we've all seen it. It's got visitor spending by industry September to December 21. And it's this electronic card transaction stuff which I think is completely unreliable. I can understand why people who run accommodation do not want to give money to towards visitors, towards tourism. The majority of the 20 million was retail trade. Well, why on earth do you not get some money out of local retailers? If you're going to count electronic card transaction as tourism, the people that benefit should pay. There's virtually nobody in transport and travel, very little accommodation, but tourism expects them to contribute, whereas retail trade pays nothing. Isn't there some other way you can truly report on the actual spend by tourists rather than people just buying some petrol or some groceries?
Thank you. I'll speak to that. I think the point you make is very valid, and it is something that's understood and agreed within the sector. Data and insights has been something that has been a challenge for us for years, and trying to understand. So really that data that we present allows us to see trends, and so we can understand year on year the comparisons rather than taking it as truly gospel. The other thing about that is that because it's recording credit card transactions, some of that is actually people who travel for work. So we see it for what it is, which allows us to I suppose, observe trends and not be too literal with it. There are a number of other tools that are being tested and applied in order to be able to be more tangible about the actual tourism value. And we, within Christchurch NZ, we've got a data analyst who is currently exploring different ways of measuring tourism in a truer sense so that we don't rely on this data.
Councillor Falloon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a point of clarification, looking at the same figure that Councillor Wilson did a moment ago, where we've got ECT visitor spending. So if I go into Sparrows and buy a pair of socks, and then someone goes in from Auckland and buys a pair of socks, how do they know that the one from Auckland's a visitor and I come from Ashburton?
Based on where your credit card bank is held.
If I could add to that as well, the credit card has to be from the issuer at least 40 kilometres away from its spend point. So they must be out of our district in that particular effect.
Thank you. I've got another question, which was on your KPIs, and I know you have an advisory group, and you say you've been meeting, or you've met 4 times this year. What are you discussing, or what's coming out of those meetings going forward, I guess is my question.
I'll initially start talking to that point. Sure. We had a meeting actually only 2 weeks ago with the advisory group. The purpose of that meeting, those meetings, really is to receive feedback from a cross-section of industry experts to ensure that the work that we are undertaking is fit for purpose and on point. The meeting that I sat in on 2 weeks ago, we talked about an array of marketing initiatives that have been undertaken, some media engagement that we have been managing, the challenges that are being faced by the industry. We didn't go into detail around the report that you see before you today and that you've had before you for the last few weeks, because we wanted to meet today first. However, we were able to provide a top-line indication that we are concerned and there are concerns, and seek feedback from that group. So it is very much what it is called, which is an advisory group, where we also receive feedback if things aren't going according to plan, or if there are constructive recommendations on things we could be doing differently or better.
Thank you. And that group, I mean, I know you've got some good members on that, but will that change? Is there sort of a system for that to change membership every year or 2 years, or how does that work?
Yeah, under the terms of reference that we've issued to the membership, it's 2 years, and there should be a chair, a deputy chair, and if anybody resigns, then we choose as a membership whether we replace that person or in fact just leave that position unavailable.
Great, thank you. Question from Stuart Wilson. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My question, after listening to our illustrious Prime Minister today gleefully announce that the borders will be open, is the tourist industry capable, because there's very little immigration regarding people that support the industry. I mean, Mount Hutt and Queenstown, we heard they're down to their bare bones as far as personnel goes. how is your industry going to handle if we do get the thousands or hundreds of thousands that you've been promised?
That's a very, very good question, and I'd say that that is the number one challenge, and it is a very real challenge. There are initiatives underway to try and drive a workforce program. Tourism New Zealand are undertaking a program in Australia with the support of MB to drive visitation for the winter season to help support the ski areas, for instance. However, ultimately, I think the numbers we need versus what that campaign, for instance, might generate, there will be a shortfall. So it is a challenge, and it's a real challenge that is being discussed within the sector itself to try and determine how we can work together to support one another. In terms of the reality around border openings and numbers, it is very exciting. However, if last year was anything to go by, when the borders opened in winter, visiting friends and relatives was the first real rush of visitor arrivals, and we are forecasting that that will be the same this time around. So it will be family wanting to come home and see their loved ones, followed by the leisure market. I think ski is going to be very busy. But if we look at other countries who have recently opened their borders, Australia being an example, they haven't had an immediate significant rush. It has been very slow and gradual and growing. And I and the tourism, stakeholders, I suppose, that I'm engaging with are imagining the same will occur.
Thank you. Councillor Lovett.
Yeah, I was just thinking on that one, when the borders do open, don't forget about the travelling Kiwis, because there is a lot of them on the road and they shouldn't be forgotten about at the expense of ones coming in from overseas. And, we're seeing lots of caravans and camper vans stopping in Ashburton, and I'm wondering, is there anybody out there actually physically asking them, a few questions why they stopped or what they expect, want to do in the town? I'm wondering whether we should have a static display somewhere, because you do see them wandering around. We need to promote our district, and I think it's probably a big piece there we could tap into.
I'll certainly talk to the first point, and maybe Bruce, you the second. In terms of the domestic market, the point you make is so valid, and it's certainly something that we have been working on in advance of today's news. We were really hopeful today's news would occur, but not at the cost of the domestic market. We are very grateful to the domestic market, and therefore we're continuing with a significant body of work around telling the story of place and promoting the region. It's called an Always On campaign. It's a campaign that's going to run throughout the year, and it's a domestic campaign so that we don't take our foot off the pedal. That's a market that has been loyal and stuck with us through thick and thin, and therefore we want to continue to hold that as our priority market. Backing that up, we've actually also committed to a very large campaign with Tourism New Zealand and Australia, so we're staying close to home with that market. But you're very right that that domestic market is super important to us, and therefore we will continue to do a lot to keep the marketing activity in place. With regards to local research and activity for the camper van market, maybe Bruce, I'll leave you to have a respond to that.
I'll just add another point as well. Tourism New Zealand was assigned the domestic market in the COVID-19 period, and before that there was no organisation looking after domestic tourism. And what I can confirm is the government also said today, and also a couple of days ago, that Tourism New Zealand will continue to market domestic as well. So that's quite exciting. To give you an indication, here in the Ashburton District, 60% of our visitors are from across the domestic market. And we've been very lucky with that. You've probably heard of other centres around the South Island that haven't had the joy of the domestic market, and some of the reasons for that is because they've forgotten them. and they haven't looked after them in previous to COVID. So, you know, we've been very lucky to be able to have the visitors from the domestic markets that we've had over this time. Have certainly supported our groups well. In terms of identifying who these people are, and also you know, identifying how they can get information, we've got 4 satellite information centres around our district, and they're doing incredibly well. We have obviously a very small manpower in terms of Christchurch NZ, being me. So it's a little bit difficult to be able to get out there and, you know, actually ask the question and survey some of the people. But there are surveys that go on from time to time in different parts of New Zealand that you know, capture that type of information. I'm not aware of one that's on at the moment, but certainly there are organisations out there that are capturing that type of data in terms of where they're from, how they've got there, etc.
There is a tool, it's actually a data tool that we use called Campermate, and you'll be familiar with it as well, but we find that very helpful too.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Rawlinson.
Thank you. I've got a comment and then a question. My comment was about the, you just touched on it, the Kia Ora magazine. That article in there was excellent. I thought it gave great coverage of our district, and it was pleasing to see Lake Hood and the Aviation Museum, because so often we see promotion of around the foothills, but we don't see it down here. My question though was around, if and ever this tourism can get going, how's it going to be staffed? It's a big question, I know.
It's a really big question. I think one of the things that that has been really uplifting for us today with the Prime Minister's announcement is the reality around the 2nd of May visa waiver countries being able to enter New Zealand as well. We were fairly confident around Australia. We weren't so sure what the rest of the world looked like. Our hope is that there will be an influx of those young people whose OEs have been put on hold for the last few years, and they will want to make the rush to New Zealand. We all know that there are some pretty awful things going on around us, and hopefully New Zealand will be seen as an attractive destination to come and spend their OE. And as I said, MB and Tourism New Zealand are focused on trying to support the industry as well to grow a skill base and workforce.
Thank you, and I think the challenge is going to be to make New Zealand an attractive place to go to again. We were, but you know, people aren't necessarily seeing us as that anymore. And yesterday I heard a gentleman talking who said him and his wife are off to Australia as soon as they can get their lives sorted, leaving New Zealand, and between the two of them, he said, we've got jobs arranged, we are going to earn 50,000 or more a year than we're earning now. And he said that's the challenge, because he knew a lot of other people who were planning on doing the same. So yeah, I wish the tourism industry good luck.
Thank you. Final question, looks like Councillor Falloon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. But what you were just saying before, what you're hoping is, as we get the overseas visitors, it's going to bring in an influx of what we call backpackers, who will be available to do the work, particularly in the tourist industry and in the hospo industry and that sort of thing, because that's who we've normally relied on to do that sort of work. But the big question is, are Immigration New Zealand going to allow the people to come in on 6-monthly and 12-month working visas? Because with some of the idiot decisions immigration have made to date, we could be holding out for a long time.
Probably more a comment than a question, is it?
Quite a tricky one to answer that.
Yeah.
But I will say it's a very valid point, and from an advocacy perspective, we are absolutely flying that flag as well to say, please make it as easy as possible, because we need them. We really need them, and I know that there is a lot of work going on behind the scenes to try and make that as seamless as possible.
Great, thank you. There don't seem to be any other questions, so thank you very much, Cass and Bruce, for being here. Welcome, Cass, to coming along to our meetings from now on. We hope to see you again. Thank you. Councillors, we will move back to item number 6, and there's a recommendation there on triennial elections. Oh, sorry, before that, would someone like to move that we receive the Christchurch NZ report? Councillor Cameron and Councillor Brahm. All those in favour, aye. Against, no, carried. Thank you. So we'll move now to number 6, triennial elections. You would have read the report. Any questions for either Hamish or Philippa? Councillor Mackay. No. Oh. Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one comment I'd like to make.
Questions at the moment?
Yes, I'm going to ask the Chief Executive, if I may, to make sure that the boundary lines between the wards are very clearly marked. There was a lot of trouble last time, and even as a new councillor standing, and I went and saw the staff, and we had a dickens of a trouble to find out just where the boundary of the West Ward was. It was only local knowledge that we managed to get it. So I think the maps that show where the ward boundaries are is essential.
Through Madam Chair, yes, we'll turn our attention to that.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, a question?
I've got a question. Page 26 on number 4. What's the difference between random and pseudo-random?
Philip, did you want to answer that?
It's shown in the report, but pseudo-random would be where names would be put in a hat, and the order they came out in would be the order applied to every voting paper on that issue, whereas random is entirely sorted randomly. Every paper's unique.
Councillor Mackay, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just referring, Councillor Latham made a comment about boundary lines. The boundary lines apparently, according to the Guardian newspaper, they were changed last time, but is it correct that maybe I'm a bit wrong here, is it correct that the councillors or the councillor that sat at the table made the decisions actually got the boundary line wrong in that instance, or am I being too close to the grain there?
Hamish, would you like to answer that?
That's not my understanding of the issue that occurred.
Right. So the councillor that had a problem was not at the table making that decision that day. So
there was certainly
that's cleared the year for me. Thank you.
I'm not sure whether there's a question there to answer or not. There are a range of issues that occurred with a particular situation, not the least of which, and I'll be making this point through my obligations to promote the election at the appropriate time, is that all those who stand for council and decide to lodge their nomination paper at 5 to 12 on the last day with the deadline at midday run more a risk than if they lodged it a week before. So I'll be urging people to make the decision and to get their nominations in early so that any issues that might arise from anywhere in the system have a far greater chance of being caught than at the very last minute. I'm not sure if that answers the question or not.
Councillor Brahm, do you have a question?
I'm not quite happy to second the motion.
I've just got one question first, if that's okay. I see there's a candidate information evening that will be held. Can that information evening be, because I'm aware elected members also include the Methven Community Board, and it would be quite good to get some of those prospective nominees to come along as well, but could the candidate evening be recorded or Zoom, such as here, live streamed, so that people at home can see what's been said and get that information instead of just reading the candidate information booklet?
Yes, this report is aimed at a very specific matter, which is the order of candidates' names on a ballot paper.
Yes,
there are certainly a whole range of other issues around the election, how we promote it, how we make both knowledge of the election, encourage candidates to stand, encourage voters to vote. So there is a whole range of ways in which we're thinking of how do we create interest in the election. And in fact, there was a legislative change just prior to the last election, but hadn't really bedded itself in, whereas the Chief Executive has a legal responsibility to promote participation in the election. And so how we, across the country, how Chief Executives such as myself are going to discharge that legal responsibility is starting to be given quite some thought. So yes, the manner in which information is shared and is accessible to people will be part of that. And I guess one of the things that we've all learned through COVID in particular is that online or virtual information flow and webinars and other ways of connecting with our community have become a lot more varied through our last experiences of the last couple of years. So yes, we'll certainly be turning our mind to all that.
Thank you. Sorry, it was in the report, so that's the reason why I asked. Councillor Mackay, did you want to?
Madam Chair, I've got another question.
Yes, one more question.
Two more, but I'll put them together. To the Chief Executive, has he noticed in his extensive time in local government that it makes any difference to voter perception of a candidate, whether the candidate is in early or late in the nomination period? And if so, what extenuating circumstances has drawn him to the conclusion that he may answer in the way he does of the question?
I'll base my answer on it.
In other words, if the last candidate in, does they have a decided advantage over the first candidate in? You might have a
in terms of the order of the names on the ballot.
No, in the terms of whether that candidate gets elected or not.
In terms of whether they get elected, no, I don't know. I've got no answer to that. No.
Okay, so we, Councillor, who was going to move this motion?
Yeah, I'll move.
Councillor Mackay, second, and Councillor Lovett.
Thank you.
All those in, any debate? No, all those in favour say aye. Against, no, carried. Thank you. We now move to the Mayor's report, and obviously the Mayor is not here, but he's got a very good report. And I've been advised that if there are any questions that perhaps the Chief Executive could help answer as well, if I don't know the answer. Any questions on the Mayor's report? Councillor Lovett.
I was just going to 8.5, the Mayor's discretionary fund. I don't believe, should we be in this game? Have we got the expertise and our staff to be able to go through these applications and decide who's can qualify and who can't? Because we're not a social welfare agency. I kind of really, questioning that. Do we have, are we in connection with social welfare systems, or can our staff make these decisions any better than social welfare?
I think the Mayor decides on this, so it's not up to the councillors, it's the Mayor makes the decision whether the funding should be allocated. Is that correct?
That's right. This fund, through Madam Chair, is the Mayor's discretionary fund. So an applicant will fill in the form, they will make the claims that they make, they'll sign that form as a true and correct record, and the Mayor will consider the merits of that application and resolve accordingly. So the reference to staff is not really quite as relevant in this particular piece of work.
I'm just wondering how do we find the people are genuine, who are, is it going to open a floodgate? That was.
I think, through Madam Chair, there's a finite amount of money. If the person is claiming a particular set of circumstances, then the Mayor will follow whatever course he or she deems necessary to judge that course of action. In the end, we would start by the point of view that these people are in need and have filled out the application form correctly, and the merits of the case will then rest with the way in which the mayor of the day sees the matter.
And I think it does state in here it's almost a last resort. So it's if they have applied or gone through to WINS or gone through to someone else, and it's a last resort. And I had quite a long discussion with the mayor about this because I said they've got to fill out a form firstly. What happens if it's a weekend? How's that going to work? And I think this is just starting to see how it goes. And he said he would be available on the weekends if the matter arose. So yeah, in the end, it's his discretion. But Councillor Rawlinson, a question?
One about that and one about something else. Just with that, each year, do we know, does it commonly get, the 10,000 get totally used up? Is it common for that to happen, that applications will utilise the whole fund?
I'd have to perhaps ask Paul to check against the financial system to know. I don't actually know the answer. It genuinely is at the mayor's discretion, and it's not something the general staff in the office have a great deal of visibility on, to be absolutely honest, but Paul might be able to answer that
We'll
question.
go to you, Paul.
I will come back to you on that, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't fully spent last year.
Philippa can also confirm.
I can tell you that it hasn't all been spent. I can't tell you, I think there is still money there, and it is the mayor's intention that that fund be rolled over from one financial year to the next, any unspent funds. But it may also mean that once the fund is fully expended in any given financial year, an application that would otherwise be eligible will simply miss out because the money's come to an end. So
I think it also may have been used during the flooding event as well. Another question. Sorry, you've got another
thank
question.
you for that answer. Yes, I did think that some was used in the flooding. My other one is NZTA's response when they were here to the things they were going to look into was about the speed going into Methven. And in here, I'm wondering, are they totally confused? Because it says about the speed change as one enters Methven coming from Ashburton, which is not what your petition is about. It's coming from the Mount Hutt end. And I'm wondering, are they looking at it entirely wrongly, or is that just a misprint?
I doubt it's a misprint because that's what he said. I think what he's really saying, though, is that there's a very complicated process to review speed limits, regardless of which end of Methven you're coming into. So I think he's got the point of the petition wrong in terms of its accurate description. But if you step back from having described it poorly, the real message in there is it's a complex, time-consuming, difficult process to change the speed limit. And I don't think it matters which way you're coming into Methven, that will still apply.
Yeah, I know the system's complicated, but it just, when I read it, I thought, it's that lack of feet on the ground, local knowledge of where you're talking about, which maybe we need to clarify with them.
And just to answer that, James Cagle did give me a call last week to talk about the issue, and he was going to email me back, but I'm guessing that this is part of the email. So he did understand the situation, and unfortunately nothing has changed. They're just waiting for the rules to be changed through Parliament and agreed on, and our MP Joe Luxton has also been looking into this and has been in contact with Minister for Transport about it as well. So the ball is rolling, but it is very slowly rolling. Councillor Falloon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was good of Mr Cagle to come back to us with all our questions. The one I comment on is the passing lanes on State Highway 1 Bridge. 12 months ago when we were discussing the second bridge, they didn't seem to think it was going to be too big a problem to put wider passing lanes on there. And now they come back, NZTA now come back, encourages all users of the clip-on shared pedestrian and cycle path to take care and be as courteous as possible if they need to pass each other along the way. Well, doesn't that apply to every other bit of roading in New Zealand where they're prepared to spend hundreds of millions of dollars? And what do we get? Be courteous and be kind. Sounds like the Prime Minister.
Councillor Mackay.
Madam Chair, just to, sorry, Madam Deputy Mayor, just to clarify, are we discussing what the Mayor's report, or are we discussing the Mayor's discretionary fund, or what are we?
So we'll discuss the Mayor's report first, and then there's a recommendation on the discretionary fund, so we can go back and talk on that. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'd just like to comment on the NZTA report, cycling way location in Tumwell. Mr. Kogel, when he was here, said it was pressure from stakeholder workshops. Now he says Waka Kotahi has identified as the best connectivity to the residential area. In other words, it's them deciding, it's not the ratepayers or the stakeholders. I was also interested in holding a workshop with ADC staff to work through to the design. I know our previous roading manager was very, very keen to put it down Malcolm Street rather than down the main road. In these sorts of situations, the councillors, the local councillors, get all the pressure from the ratepayers. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And looks as if the staff only talk to Waka Kotahi, but we get the flack. Is there never a case for including elected people sometimes in the discussions that they have with these sorts of bodies?
Neil McCann, can't see your light, but there you go.
Through the Chair, we will certainly be asking that they do include the working group members that were previously involved when they come back and discuss this the next time, because it is something we do need to discuss with the various stakeholders who've been involved up to now.
Thank you. And I presume the Mayor will respond to this letter as well with some feedback. Is that the case?
Possibly. I think we had the discussion with Mr. Kagel, and he undertook to give Waka Kotahi's view, and you've now got it. I guess there's a range of matters that arise from him having confirmed Waka Kotahi's view that might lead to further correspondence. But you've got the position that he couldn't answer on the day.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been one of those councillors who's been talking to them, and I had a good discussion regarding the bike track, and basically they followed my advice. I'm the only councillor here who's biking over the bridge quite regular. Oh, sorry, John will be the same for a cup of coffee if he goes to the lake, but I mean, the way it's been planned, to me, is the best way forward. So there might be different views here, but I'm the one on the bike. I think I know better than someone in the car.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
I think the letter from Waka Kotahi...
Can you just move your microphone so we can all hear, please?
Beg your pardon. This letter from Waka Kotahi does not represent the conversation we had about 8 months ago, to my understanding. First of all, the clip-ons, as John alluded to, were going to be a goer, and we get constant remarks about the clip-ons and how not fit for purpose they are with scooters and all sorts of things. The other thing was we talked about little, I think we call them pedestrian islands or something in the middle of, so that the kids going biking to school can cross safely across the State Highway 1 on the south side of the Timwell Bridge, and also outside opposite the museum art gallery we were going to have a sort of a walkway so people can cross over to get to the overhead bridge. And I may well have missed it, but I can't see any reference to that. I do think we need to go back in the strongest possible way and just say you didn't listen to us, so either way they were derelict in their duties. Clearly they didn't listen, or they've obfuscated and not answered the questions or the issues that we've raised. accurately. And so either way, it's very disappointing.
Hamish, did you want to comment?
Just to acknowledge the disappointment, but I think that the clip-on is really clear. What Gatahi is saying, they're having a look at it, and there's no guarantee they're going to do it.
No.
So there's utter clarity. It's just that we don't like where that clarity is pointing.
Well, no, but the clarity's changed a little bit, I think. Oh, sorry, I'm going to get my mask all sorted out. The clarity has changed a little, well, you know.
Yes, and I think one of the matters that we all know in relation to Waka Kotahi is the budget pressure they've got. They didn't approve all of the low-risk, low-cost initiatives that people thought were going to go ahead.
Yeah.
We know that fuel and tax is under increasing pressure. In fact, the government has just reduced it further, although I understand they're going to top it up. And there's pressure from all sorts of other initiatives on that budget. So until Waka Kotahi, through their plans, allocate money to a project and they say this is now approved, you cannot guarantee they're going to do something just because in a meeting they acknowledge it might have been a good idea. So I think there's just ongoing issues and an expression of concern from council on those matters that are important to us, I think is still appropriate. But
Can I respond to that, please?
Yes.
I'm an elected representative for the Ashburton District Council, so my concerns extend from Rangitata to Rakaia, and obviously for the Greater New Zealand, in far as that I'm a citizen of the country. But my concerns are for the health and well-being of people that live in the Ashburton District Council. And we've got 26,000 people going over that bridge, as we've heard repeatedly, mainly Ashburton people, who try and get kids to school, and people on scooters, and people that have lost their licence because their population's getting older, that can't safely traverse the road without taking the, to cross that road south of the bridge, to go from the east to the west side of the Archibald Street is very challenging. Let alone if you're 12 years old and not watching things properly. And we all have heard that people's vision and their brains don't grow up enough until they're so old, and you've got to be careful and all the rest of it. So I understand your perspective, Hamish, but I also take a point that we have to have a clear goal and a clear focus and a vision of where we want to be. And we want to have, we spent a lot of time, and hopefully it wasn't wasted, asking for these jolly traffic islands, or pedestrian islands, or whatever the special word was. And they're not even mentioned in this letter. And we were talking to them for about half an hour. We talked about where they'd go, and one here and a couple in Timwood. And I think we even had a meeting at the Timwood Hall about it. And all the thing is just not even, I put my glasses on and I can't see it mentioned. But I'm prepared to be wrong.
We also had a situation at one of the road safety meetings where we were told that there would be a pedestrian crossing between McDonald's and Mitre 10 Mega, I think that's correct. And at the next meeting, we were then told that they had insufficient funds and it would no longer be happening. They had the plans and everything. They'd even told us the date of when it was happening. So I think sometimes things can be out of their control, but I don't think that should stop us from maybe asking the Mayor to respond to this letter as well, and we can. We've got a recommendation on the Mayor's discretionary fund, but Councillor Wilson, did you have another question?
Yes. The question is to Councillor Brahm. As a sole cyclist in this council, we take note of your unfound knowledge on biking. I guess the rest of us that go in cars do not exclusively say that certain roads belong to me or somebody else. I take your fact that you are the sole cyclist. That's about how many people travel up and down Malcolm Street on a bike.
Councillor Cameron.
I was going to move that we accept the Mayor's report.
I've got this discretionary
Oh, well, I move that
fund.
we accept the discretionary fund as well, the criteria.
So Councillor Cameron's moving that the council receives the mayoral discretionary fund report and endorses the criteria and guidelines to be applied to applications made for financial assistance. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Brahm, are you happy to second?
And I've got a reply as well, if I can.
Yeah, we're on the discretionary fund now, and then I'll
That's
go
fine.
to your reply. Thank you. Was there another comment?
Yes, the reply. Yes, I'm still alive as the only biker, and it's not due to the cars. with my knowledge how to end biking right properly. But thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you. We'll put the motion. You're done, Councillor Brown. Councillor Mackay, did you have
May I?
a question on the
No.
discretionary fund?
Oh, we're in a motion, aren't we? Can I make a comment, please? Are we debating the motion or are we still questions? What are we doing?
We're debate on this.
Okay.
Yep.
May I?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, councillors. Sometimes mayoral discretionary funds are seen as a bit of loose cash lying around. In recent years, there has been 2 occasions on which a mayoral fund set up and ready to go could have been used and has been used, or could have been used and has been used to the advantage of the people of this district. One was when an unfortunate incident happened on Cash Street near the corner of Moore Street, and there was no mayoral fund for that. And we had to operate through the benevolent trust, which took the decision away on this council area. The other was in the latest floods, and the Mayor had the foresight, with money coming available, to put a little committee around himself and some criteria, and had a staff member finding out background information, etc., etc. And that worked very well to the benefit, and it was set up and ready to go. So there's the one side that you can have a bit of slush fund lying around, but if you have a mechanism in place, ready to go, when emergencies happen, I think is an ideal situation. That's why I'm in favour that we pass and endorse this recommendation from staff.
Thank you. Councillor Letham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just speak in support of the motion. Discretionary funds are not uncommon. President of the Rotary Club has a discretionary fund for exactly the same thing. It's for an emergency, something pops up, a family or an individual needs some urgent cash injection just to get them through a very, very tricky spot. So I'm very much in favour of this, and I urge the council to pass it.
Thank you. Any more speakers for or against? No, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, no. Carried. Thank you. And then also someone to move that we receive, I'll move that we receive the Mayor's report. So we have extraordinary business, and Councillor Lovett, you have...
Yes, I have got a few letters here. I'm not sure what else is in here because they're all in sealed envelopes, but it is from the group of the Voices for Freedom Ashburton, as they cannot come into the council chambers. They have given me these to deliver to the Mayor and the CEO. I see some of them addressed to Hamish. And these are from many families and individuals of the Ashburton branch of the Voice of Freedom group. Many of our members have emailed their concerns also. We would have liked to have presented these letters to you ourselves, but as many of us remain unvaccinated, we cannot enter the council premises. We have written these in the hope that you will consider dropping the mandate of the vaccine passports for all council facilities. And they sort of go on about, you know, what happened with the judge, with the police and stuff, that test case in court. And they look at also the one on the religious grounds. And they're just saying that with the presence of Omicron in our community, the mild effects of the virus and the fact that the vaccinated and unvaccinated can catch it and pass it on, and it seems that the vaccine pass mandates have become redundant in their usefulness. Voices for Freedom Ashburton asks that you please consider these facts and drop the mandate passes, vaccine passes. And I guess do you want me to
yes, bring them
over to you?
Thank you.
And I'm just going to say, you know, can we have a request to the CE to bring a report back to council?
So would that be the process to bring a report back to council on this? Is that, how do we move forward from here?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I think that's, if council was to resolve that we prepare a report and bring it to a future meeting, then we would do that.
Okay, thank you.
And that there's a on the top letter, I think it's from a 9-year-old boy that's upset because he can't go to the library, he can't go to the swimming pool, and he can't take part in sports, and feels he's been penalised like a lot of other children in the county. And now that Omicron's so widespread, I think it's time we visited the situation.
Thank you. Is it correct that you can't go into the library if you're a 9-year-old child? Was it not from 12-year-old and up?
So, as I say, Madam Chair, if council was to resolve that a report on the lifting of the mandates was to be passed, then we will certainly prepare that report for council's consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move that we thank the people for their submission, which we receive, and it will be, what's the word, read, regarded or considered at a later date.
And would you also like to move that a report be prepared for council?
No.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Falloon.
I certainly second it. I think mandates have had their day, and basically Omicron is just another type of flu. I think within 3 months we won't even be required to wear masks, and I see organisations such as Fonterra have now done away with mandates as far as their employees are concerned. So I think we really should be calling for a report on this mandate thing to take no longer than the next 30 days.
Okay, I'm getting confused. So Councillor Latham has moved that we thank Voices for Freedom for the report, for the submissions, but you don't think there needs to be a report coming from council, yet Councillor Falloon has seconded that. You're right. That you would like a report. So I
actually moved when I asked.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I actually moved.
Okay, so you're moving.
Yes, and I think it needs to come back quite quickly.
Point of order.
Yeah.
Point of order.
Okay, just one moment. You want to?
I don't believe there was a mover and seconder other than Councillor Lovett moved the information be received, but so that was Councillor Latham seconded it, but is there any?
Yes, if I could be so bold as to offer some advice.
I think that might be a good idea in this case.
And unless the point of order needs to be understood from Councillor Mackay first.
Do you want to speak, Councillor Mackay?
If I may have my point of order.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I don't fully hear of what was said on the advice, so the point of order still stands. I believe that Councillor Lovett moved. I then believe that Councillor Latham moved a motion that's actually contrary, and I move, and I believe that Councillor Falloon seconded Councillor Lovett. So I really suggest, Madam Chair, that you rule Councillor Latham's motion out of order, because his motion was contrary to Councillor Lovett's motion, which had not been seconded at that time.
Madam Chair, if it helps, I moved that motion because I didn't realise that Councillor Lovett had actually moved anything.
Wasn't clear to me either.
It wasn't clear, so I'm quite happy to withdraw my motion.
Thank you. That would be helpful. So Councillor Lovett has moved that we thank Voices for Freedom for their letters and submission, and that we will have a report at our next next meeting if possible.
Yeah, no, we'll bring it to the next council meeting.
Thank you, and Councillor Falloon is happy to second that. Is there any more debate? Councillor Brown.
I've got a question. So a report for what? That you received it? Did it look nice or what? To me, this...
I'll go to Hamish.
Through Madam Chair, my understanding from both what Councillor Lovett said in handing this over and also from an email I've received from those people saying that this information was coming, is that they're calling for a cessation of the mandates that we currently have in place. So the report that we will prepare for you will be to consider whether or not Council is prepared to rescind the mandates that are currently in place. And it will touch on a range of issues, as you can anticipate and expect, and we'll make a recommendation to you in relation to the Council's current position around the mandate. So that's the report that we anticipate writing for your meeting in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you. Is everyone clear? Councillor Mackay.
Madam Chair, in that report, if I could be so bold, can it also be pointed out that the Council by majority of voices asked the Chief Executive some months ago for a mandate, and do we have to go through the formal process if Council wishes to change its mind? Does it have to go through the formal process according to standing orders of the time limit? Can that be reported on as well?
Yes, indeed.
Decisions.
I think I understand the point. One of the matters that we will turn our mind to in this report is that if Council does have a mind to lift the mandates, what process they have to follow to do so, given the fact that at the moment we have a Council resolution on the books that they're in place at red and orange alert levels in this country. Those alert levels haven't changed. So there's, to me, a question of process as much as there is of merit to the actual request. So we will be turning our mind to those issues as well.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think it's going to take a lot of work, and I would rather leave it to government policy. They're going to change from orange to red to orange possibly, and it'll make our decision irrelevant. I think we're jumping the gun a bit. Personally, I would rather leave it until government policy decides. It seems to be moving so quickly at the moment, government policy on this type of thing, that we might spend a lot of time and effort on a report. By the time we get it, it could be redundant.
Okay, well, I'll put the motion. Those in favour.
Hang on. Could you read the motion then, please?
Councillor Lovett, your motion.
I could attempt it.
Philippa will.
That the information be received from the Voices for Freedom group and that a report be provided for Council's consideration of removing the vaccination pass mandate.
Happy with that. Councillor Cameron.
I've got a question with regards to process. If the government advises us that everybody that goes into public spaces has to have a mask, and if you have to have a mask on the aeroplane, you have to have a mask on the buses and all the rest of it, can we as a council defy or ignore that information? Like, is our report or our position relevant, if you like?
Through Madam Chair, we certainly cannot defy the law of the land. So
No.
if there is a law regulation promulgated by the government as to we have to do something, then that's what we must do. However, where there is discretion, and in the case of mandates on public facilities, there is discretion insofar as, in my understanding, the original health order doesn't apply. And we've already seen the health order as it applied to our facilities particularly impacted on the education sector as they used our facilities. And we've seen by regulation, government in the last 2 weeks has deemed that the education outside the classroom activities, that everyone involved in those are vaccinated for the purposes of access to the facility. So again, not a decision we made, but now if a school sports team wants to access EA Network Centre, for example, even though the mandated vaccine pass is on that facility, they are deemed to be vaccinated for the purposes of their education outside the classroom activities. So there's an example where government regulation has put us in a position where we must simply do that because that's what the regulation says. The lifting of the mandates, though, that we have placed on the facilities per se, still applies as a discretionary decision this council made. So we have the ability to lift those within the rules and regulations by a decision. So yes, we do have the capacity or the ability, if you like, to make that decision. Just as we made the decision to put them on, the council did, and other councils around New Zealand made different decisions at times.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay.
Madam Chair, I wish to speak in favour of the recommendation from Councillor Lovett, and pointing out that yes, I believe we can give it a go to challenge government on this. We're challenging government on 3 waters, and so be it, and I hope we win. And I also hope that we win this one, whatever's in the report. Remembering that if if Chief Executive comes back with a recommendation, that we can change that under meeting procedure if we desire to as a council.
Thank you, Councillor Falloon.
Yeah, just in support of the motion. The reason why I support it is basically it's a decision we made as a council that everyone who entered our facilities, i.e. the library and the swimming pool, had to have a vax pass, etc., etc. Some councils have made the decision not to mandate their facilities. So to me, it has nothing to do with central government. This is a local government issue, and people will vote accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm against it. I think it's just a waste of space. It's the normal way, and in a couple of months it will be fine. So to do it now and try to do something done a month earlier is just a lot of money. Just wait, and it will happen by itself.
Thank you. Councillor Lovett, right of reply.
I just think it's the right time to have a look at it, especially as it's rampant through this town, and give it another week or so. And I think it won't be such an issue. And to be honest, I know people that have got COVID and their children, and they've only got a tickly throat. It's not really affecting them at all. So some people get sick. A lot of others don't even know they've got it. And I think, and if it's affecting the children going into winter sports and everything, I think it's time we looked at it. We're denying kids going for swimming and denying them to go to a library or a museum. And these kids are missing out on so much schooling now, and they need every opportunity to be educated. So I absolutely think it's time we looked at it, and yeah.
Councillor Latham, did you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a point of clarification, if I may. We've got a motion here that says we thank the people for their petition, which we receive, and then we are asking for a report.
That's right.
Most of the debate so far, I think, is about whether we need a report. So if I vote against this motion, I'm voting against receiving the petition.
That's correct.
And I think we should receive the commission with dignity and courtesy. They've gone to the trouble to do it, but I think we're going to get tangled up with whether we get a report or not.
Yes.
I believe that.
You're sorry, Councillor Brown. Can you take your light off?
And looking at debating again when the final say has been had by the mover of the motion.
Okay, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against? No. Carried. Thank you. Can I have someone to, we haven't moved the Mayor's report yet, have we? Can I have someone to move the Mayor's report? Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Rawlinson. All those in favour say aye. Against, no. Thank you. And last item is just my report, which was on the LSB course And if you've got any questions, that's great. If you, yes.
I've got one question. Did you walk 10K at 4:30 in the morning? Very well done.
I walked 10K at 5 a.m. in the morning, so, and luckily it was a nice balmy morning around the Rolleston prison.
I noticed you say other councillors should put their hand up. I don't know how many of them.
It's optional to what you attend, what you attend at the LSV course. I don't, the Mayor was also a patron of this course, but I think due to his commitments he didn't make any of the walks, so I'm told. If there's nothing further, that's the end of our open meeting. I think it's probably time. Would someone like to move that I'll move that my report's received. Councillor Wilson, second. Thank you. All those in favour, aye. Against, no, carried. Thank you. That's the end of our open meeting. I think we will have a quick cup of tea.